I think people do enjoy engaging with these characters who are real people too, and that's the first thing. Second thing is I think they get the sense of a real thriller story. Each book kind of gathers a momentum. They're carefully structured books. They're not small, slim volumes. They're all around about 400 pages or slightly. Well, yeah, so you get a good read from them, and they are very contemporary. So they're dealing with issues of our time. And they're books that not only grip you because they're exciting, you want to know what's happening, but they grip you because they're touching on themes that matter now. So things about Brexit, hate crime, populists, place of religion in society, migrants, policing, all these themes people care about deeply. They're of our times, and I think that's why they like them. And also, the books, to some extent, deal with things people are not familiar with and want to learn about. A number of people have said to me, when you wrote about Istanbul or about Oman, that was so interesting because that opened the doors to different worlds. And one of the things that I've been fortunate in being able to do in recent years has been travel to the Middle East and to meet and talk with people in Turkey, in Dubai, in Oman, and that has really been very helpful to me. And I think people have enjoyed entering those worlds. And these are places to watch. I mean, Turkey, for example, gosh, you couldn't make up what's happening there. It's on the borders between Christian West, if you like, the West and the Islamic world. And you have, again, another country where a more extremist leader is emerging in Erdogan, who's taking more and more powers to himself. You're seeing the Islamification of the country and the erosion of the secular settlement that Ataturk introduced there. You've got Hagia Sophia only this last couple of weeks being turned back into a mosque from being a cultural and iconic monument. You've got a very interesting country to watch. And I think people enter into grappling with some of these international politics through the local politics of these books of the individuals. So there's a lot for a lot of people to take from them, really.
Yeah, hello and welcome to Interfaith Insights Spotlight on Faith. And today I am joined with a very special author, John E. Hall, who is the author of 7 interfaith thrillers, with a new one on the way. I believe the new book is called, is it Truth?
The new book, Truth, is out, but the new one out is called Harry's Awakening.
Harry's Awakening. Harry's Awakening is coming very soon. So his unique background gives him an insights into multi-faith relationships up close and how individuals can get sucked into a life of crime and extremism. John is a former probation officer and priest in the Church of England, and before his retirement was director of the St Philip's Centre for Study and Engagement in Leicester. He is also chair of the Devon Faiths and Beliefs Forum.
Yep.
He has a PhD in understanding race and racism, which has come very helpful into his writing. And in these roles and in others, he has been at close quarters in the life of the local church in the diverse and complex context of a rapidly changing multi-faith society. He has observed the ways in which different religious and ethnic groups interact with each other and with the wider world in which many originated. And he has lived intimately with the ways in which local churches respond to the needs of those communities. And much of his experience is woven in to the stories, and you can really tell that he's someone who's been in the room in a lot of these kind of situations. Welcome, John. It's just fascinating to have you here. I'm looking forward to our conversation. The first thing I want to ask you really is, what was the motivation behind writing these novels? I mean, they deal with some very hard-hitting topics. It's not your run-of-the-mill crime stories. You're dealing with extremism, racism, gang culture, the far right, interfaith love. You know, first of all, what motivated you to write these novels?
I think one of the things that I decided when I finished working in Leicester was I could have written a theological book, an academic book, discussing the themes of living in a diverse society. But that would have given these themes a very limited audience. And part of me has always loved literature, writing, history, And I really took this as an opportunity to put some novels out into public space, contemporary thrillers people would enjoy reading, but would provide safe places for people to engage with the themes and some of the kind of characters that inhabit these worlds. So that's where it comes from. And my own kind of journey of wanting to understand what drives people to see others through the eyes of hatred rather than the eyes of love.
And do you approach these books, so are you hoping to increase people's understanding of these topics? For example, looking in your stories, and you seem to understand why individuals might get sucked into a life of extremism or crime. That might be also part of your previous existence as a probation officer, but you really develop the characters well, and you develop a sympathy for the characters in the situation that they find themselves in. So
I think one of the interesting comments somebody made was that I portrayed a terrorist sympathetically, and I think that surprised them really, because they felt they could understand where the terrorist had come from, and they weren't just like a Daily Mail cut-out character. And one of the themes that I've been interested in exploring has been the theme of grooming, and that has been explored in different ways, that people are very much groomed into terrorism, into being far and extreme positions. So that's been part of the journey.
How much research do you have to do in preparing these kind of books, of getting inside the head of a terrorist or a far right leader?
I think that there's no substitute for doing good research. I mean, I've always done a lot of background reading on other people's novels. I've learned a lot from as well. Other authors I've learned a lot from. Henning Mankell, the Swedish crime writer, the Wallander stories, they pick up some really good themes which grip me as well, and they're contemporary. Sadly, he died not long ago, but for example, he explores what kind of policing is possible in a society. And I think that's incredibly relevant for us now. What kind of policing can we cope with? In fact, my next novel is looking at exactly that theme, picking up one of the characters from earlier on. Can we afford the kind of policing we need, and on what basis can policing, or what basis ought policing to be carried out in a modern, diverse society?
That's a very interesting question. Not that I want to dive too much into the world of Prevent and things like that, but one criticism has been in the past of Prevent, and I think Prevent does have a different approach in different parts of the UK. I would say in Scotland it's maybe slightly different. I think there's a perception that down south Prevent is very much a top-down approach. These are the kind of British values that you need to conform to. Whereas I think there is an attempt in Scotland to engage the communities in themselves in conversation. I don't know, but one of the things we've been lost, maybe people might say perhaps with cutbacks, also has been that local police officer who had a knowledge of the community and had the trust of the community, and they always knew, that certain PC was there. And when you remove that kind of local inside knowledge and relationship, there is a danger there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. I think I've had some contact and involvement with Prevent myself in Leicester, particularly, where it was done slightly differently. It was very much done as a community bottom-up approach.
Great. And
viewed rightly as a safeguarding issue in terms of avoiding people being groomed and indoctrinated into extremism of all different kinds. I'm personally, when Prevent's run well, I'm very supportive of it. I think where people find it difficult is when it's felt to be intrusive and heavy-handed, and where it's perceived as spying on a community, where I think that then becomes an issue.
Is that what you're getting at in terms of the policing in the new book? What is your issue?
Yeah, I think if we start with the first book, we introduced to a policeman called Bob, who was the old school police officer on the beat who observes things and believes in walking slowly. And when I was a young clergyman, I had to spend a day with the Metropolitan Police in London. And I've never forgotten walking with a beat officer. We don't see them anymore, but the beat officer told me off almost straight away. He said, "John, you're walking too fast. You will not notice anything."
Wow.
And it's those insights that you need to have. And beat officers are, if you like, the people who will hear the local community and its concerns and build relationships. We've moved from that kind of policing to a reactionary kind of policing now, responsive kind of policing. And the danger in that is that actually there's no connect with the people they're meant to serve. And you can't do the work of addressing kind of threats from extremism without relationships going on. There have been numerous incidences where good community relations have been threatened by poor police responses.
Yeah, I think we've all unfortunately had experiences of that, and on the flip side, with experiences of positive police responses as well. Yes, it's interesting because I think your books try also, you see the church in the heart of the community and faith groups in the heart of the community trying to, do service for other groups, and I think that's an important thing. And I'm thinking there when you're talking about the police, it's important that the police also have a connection with these communities and are seen to be actually involved with what's going on. Maybe it's not happening so much. One interesting thing with your stories is often, I haven't seen the latest one, is that they don't always seem to have a main character in the traditional way, but they're often different characters in the stories intertwine. Was that a deliberate decision to approach things that way?
Yes, I think so. I'm interested in the way relationships work in a diverse society. We're moving towards living in increasingly diverse societies, and how we get on together is critically important. I mean, it's quite alarming to me that the level of anti-Semitism in this country is now, it's never been so high as since the Second World War. I'm also concerned that the statistics for hate crime, down here in Devon, they're alarmingly high, and have been. And I think that we need to be looking at what's going on in society and across the diversity of society. And so my novels pick up, if you like, sympathetic stories and give voice to people from different cultures and religions, backgrounds. And one of the interesting themes, I think, in the more recent novels, like Domain, is where you've got a Christian young man, Adam, forming a relationship while at uni with a Muslim young woman. And what are the possibilities for the future of such a relationship? I think one of the things that faith groups often find hardest to talk about, for example, is those kind of cross-belief relationships and how to handle them. I think that what it's possible to do within a novel, for example, is to enable people to safely say, "Oh, look at this couple here in this novel. Is that right? Or what future have they got?" And what are the guiding religious principles as we try to look at how they might work out their relationship? Is it a relationship based around love and pastoral welfare for them, or is it around decrees and dogmas of the faith which will say, you must do this, you must do that? And I think there's a whole range, a whole debate really, that we need to find ways of safely having with each other, and the novel can help do that. Also with other issues which are to do with drugs and gang crime in the community and knife crime in the community. the book Truth picks up knife crime in a big way. And also the book Truth picks up themes around defending communities, and the idea that you defend your church by building a wall and putting a security gate, ultimately. And that issue is debated in the book Truth. But I think those kind of themes, the relations between different groups of people and how they get on together, are explored in the books in different ways. And in some ways, by crossing such a broad range of cultures, I'm not pointing the finger at any one culture either. We're saying these issues affect us all across, we're all human beings, we've all got faith, and we've all got to face some of these issues. We've got to find ways to address them.
Yeah, it's interesting in the books, there's a knock-on effect. One issue is seen in often the story intertwine, and it affects all the communities like a domino effect. I did wonder about how your own experiences and characters, how much are they based on real life? Because, I mean, you started off there by talking about, the difficulty of interfaith relationships. I know in my own experiences as the director of Edmund Interfaith, there have been a few times where couples have phoned me and said, and even recently I had a Muslim woman phoning me saying, I'm looking to marry my Christian boyfriend. I can't find an imam who's prepared to do the Muslim wedding ceremony. Can you help me identify someone? I wondered if any of these kind of conversations had happened, someone had approached you, and so you're kind of relating to what someone else's story has. Is that the case with some of these?
Yeah, I've been there myself. Yeah, you see, in my own family, one of my sons has married a Jewish lady,
Right.
and they have children. So the whole question about interfaith relations comes very much home for the wider families and for themselves and for how they bring up their children, and it affected in the initial stages how they decided what kind of a marriage they could have and what was possible. And there is a lot of pain in unraveling some of these pastoral personal situations. And as you say, if an imam says no, there's no way I can't, or they can't find someone who can do that. Well, how is it possible? And what are we saying if two people who love each other can't marry? Are we saying that? You see, it brings in, to my mind, one of the big issues is human rights. If we bring human rights into the debate, then faiths sometimes want to kind of drift away from looking at human rights.
It's difficult though, because again, what just occurring to me, picking up what you're saying about building walls. If I think even I don't want to give people too much away from your books, but I think even in the first book, there was something that I've come across quite a lot, which was a concern with some churches when they let some other faith groups use their worship space. And I remember one time being invited under false pretenses to speak at a church other side of Glasgow, not knowing that actually what I was going in to do was to try and solve a dispute between the churches who were saying, can we let this, it was a local Muslim group, come in and use the hall for prayer? And it was really interesting because I could relate to the minister in your story as well, talking about, well, this is about human rights, this is about love, this is about compassion. And the other people saying, well, actually, this is our truth, this is our way, this is our church. And it's really interesting when you're talking about building walls, when we should be building walls, and whether you're actually challenging people to think you need to remove the walls. You need to think first of all about compassion. I'm wondering what are you doing here? Do you think, are you trying to challenge people to take down these walls?
I think when I was at Leicester, and you know the place,
yeah,
I I had a role in supervising the training of chaplains, which was conducted through De Montfort University. No, the Markfield Centre in Leicester. And I went along and heard from these trainee imams and others who just come back from a placement. And this one imam had been in Birmingham at a Roman Catholic school or college, and it was Friday, been on placement there as part of his training. And Friday said to the head teacher, who was standing in the school hall, and there was nobody there but him and the head teacher. He said, "Would it be all right if I just say my prayers?" And the head teacher said to him, "I'm afraid you can't. This is sacred space." So so he said, "Okay, I respect, this is your Roman Catholic." I said, what about if I go behind those curtains over there and offer my prayers? No, it's all sacred space. So we have to ask ourselves sometimes about what we understand by sacred space. And I think some of the people that have helped us most to understand that have been chaplains, because they've had to think that through and negotiate how they use what space they're given for their activities. That's, I think we haven't heard enough from chaplains in the wider faith communities, so that we look afresh at what we understand by some of these things when we start claiming bits of ground as sacred space.
It's very interesting because often I think, I'd like to think this is the same in real life, and it's the same as some of your characters, is that it's the little acts of kindness that tear down the walls often, and that have these preconceived notions of the other faith group, of the other people, and then when the people are being so kind to them, they are, "Oh, wait a minute, this is challenging. I'm not supposed to think about this about the other groups. I'm not supposed to act like this." That's very interesting.
So I think I've seen that happening, for example, in the way that joint food banks have worked, particularly through practical caring projects where barriers have been overcome. And I think these occasions are to be lauded. I mean, there was this lovely image not so long ago from a Black Lives Matter a counter demonstration where this black guy carried a white man who'd been knocked to the ground to safety. And I think where somebody steps across the divide like that to show love is extremely powerful. And I think, again, coming back to chaplaincy work, chaplains actually say, I'm here to serve all people. And I've always seen myself as a parish priest as somebody responsible to care for all the souls in the parish, no matter where they are on their faith journeys and so on. So I'm always wanting to build the divides, build neighbourliness.
And I think that is coming across in your books. How have the books been received by your friends and other faith communities? I was wondering about that because obviously you have these contacts across faith groups. I'm wondering how many have read them and how they're fed back to you. I've had quite a bit of feedback from people who write to me and so on, and I think pretty well uniformly people embrace what's in the books. I remember one draft book I asked somebody to read before it was published, and they said to me they felt the one particular faith had been portrayed negatively in the book. It was a minority faith. So I went back to the book and looked at it again. I didn't feel I wanted to give an excuse for a group to feel aggrieved, even though the plot line might have justified what was happening. So what I actually did, I decided that it didn't damage the thrust of the book if I altered the book to compensate for that error on my part. And I think I have to be very careful writing about what I do, because
it's so easy to, in a sense, glorify terrorism as well.
Mm.
You know, people think, oh yeah, somebody might pick up a book and think, oh, this Harry, he's a really successful politician guy. I like what he goes out with. He's a kind of anti-hero. Most people would see him as an anti-hero. But there might be, you know, vulnerable people might pick up the book and think, oh, he can do that. Or Ali Muhammad was able to do that as a Muslim extremist. Extremist. And yeah, I think I have to be very careful how things are handled in the books. So I don't understand, so I don't offend people. But most people I've had some amazing debates and discussions with people I'd never talked to had I not written books. I mean, I've had lots of literary festival discussions with people, lots of discussions with people outside of faith groups. I think we can very much occupy the inner spaces of our faith groups and not get out there where other people are. And I think these books have given me, through book launches, through talks, library talks, deanery synod talks, lots of different talks, given me opportunities to talk to ordinary people and people of different faiths about the issues that are raised. And universally, people have used that opportunity and found that I've been thrilled by the way people have found the books as a vehicle for talking about things they might otherwise not have talked about. That's
wonderful. I mean, you're talking about Harry's, the character Harry there from Harry's England, obviously, in Harry's Awakening. Obviously, I think a lot of people will find it a little bit alarming reading about Harry, because it really connected a chord with me, because at the moment we have this kind of rise of the far right again. We are concerned, as you mentioned earlier, about the rise in anti-Semitism. And it seems at the moment that populist leaders can emerge and can have that backing from, whether that comes from media or who, I don't know who supports some of these characters, but certainly without naming names, we can think of one or two people who have grabbed a lot of media publicity and support to spread their kind of right-wing hate. So, I mean, I wondered how much is this based on real characters, and how much is this about you also expressing your own concern about the far right? And what are the kind of lessons that you think we can get from this?
I'm glad you can't easily spot the seamless, a real baddie of the far right, and one of my characters from the far right.
Yeah, he said enough publicity.
But one of the people that I've enjoyed reading is Asni Sierstad. Now, she's an investigative journalist from Scandinavia who looked at the guy. She wrote a book called One of Us, which was about the Norwegian island killer. What's his name? I can't remember.
Yeah, I know who you mean. Yeah.
Anders Breivik.
Anders
Breivik, yeah. And she wrote that book, and that book shows you how somebody from a certain kind of background ends up being an extreme right-winger, and the kind of ideas that feed their thinking, and the kind of shadowy movements that are out there ready to groom and feed their thinking into people who are vulnerable like him. But Asni Sierstad's also written a book called Two Sisters, which came out quite recently, which talked about two young girls who'd gone over to Syria to join ISIS. And the father of those girls, we tried to save them and track them down. And both those two books really gave insightful understanding of how people end up being these extreme characters. And that's just one example of material that's out there based on reality. These are biographical books, deeply researched. There's material out there, and those are some of the things that have informed the characters, Harry and others in my book. I had a lovely letter from somebody at the weekend in the Midlands, and he was saying that he said, Harry's a very strongly drawn character. And he said, but another guy in the book called Christian Howard is just, he doesn't seem to have any sincerity or deep thinking behind his right-wing views. Are right-wingers like that? And he wrote and asked me that question. And actually, when I stopped and thought about it, a lot of the stuff that's circulated around there is pretty shallow, it's non-academic, non-learned stuff. It's just bigotry, shallow bigotry that feeds into people's hurts and prejudices. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I remember from Leicester was the EDL parades, English Defence League visits, and the hatred behind those, and the sense in which it was as much about kind of the legacy of football hooliganism and thuggery, feeding into the feeling of hard done by white working people, as anything else. And Tommy Robinson was behind some of that, and so I've done a lot of work trying to understand some of these characters that have been behind the extreme right, like Anders Breivik, like Tommy Robinson, and a whole host of others. But they're not so dissimilar to those that inhabit the world of the Islamist extremist position either. I mean, a book Julia Ebner wrote called The Rage clearly showed the two extremes feeding off each other, and the characters of the two different sides, the way they behaved is so similar. Very difficult very easy to slip into stereotyping people like a Harry. But I wanted to create somebody who was a believable real person, not just like a cardboard cutout of a right-winger. So, yeah.
That's a danger. I did think that you do very well to try and avoid that slipping into the stereotypes. But there's also an element of people who are drawing into these movements that, of course, there's a large element of those who are uneducated. But there's also quite a big propaganda machine behind these. I was at a lecture recently showing just how much money goes into the video making that the far right have. I mean, it's been recognised the far right is one of the biggest threats now.
Neil Basu at.
But these videos that they put out, they draw people in. They appeal to people, almost trying to appeal to their conscience to say, if you're patriotic or you believe in these kind of values, then join the movement. And sometimes I think there are people more susceptible who think that they're joining for good intentions, and then when they're joined, they're sucked into a whole world of hate.
There was a book. The latest Julia Ebner book came out just a few months ago. It's called Going Dark. And that's about different kinds of extremism. But she's a London-based researcher, but she did the most extraordinarily, I think, foolish things. She actually went along to extreme right-wing meetings. She wore wigs and hid her identity, and but she was very brave about doing this. Wow. But so that was really interesting.
Just saying a warm thank you for coming on today, and we encourage more people to follow the links and download more of your books. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.